Faults of Fools by K.D. Blackburn, Chapter 8, in its entirety. The cleaning ladies who did Councilwoman Croc's office space didn't have to go at it as if they had wet nails. This office didn't have important documents sprouting out of open drawers which they dared not close. The night crew could empty her trash can daily, because who knew what was not balanced on the rim of the wastebasket. But a door doesn't have to be busted down and drawers emptied onto the floor for a fastidious woman to know someone who shouldn't have been in her domain has been. A week filled with Elena had gone by since Anna Maria had reported for work. Someone had looked in her desk and in her files. Having walked in the door primed for battle, Anna Maria didn't waste time asking what might seem to be pertinent questions, or even reporting the break-in to security. Instead, she opted to engage what seemed to be the easier target first: accounting. She wanted to face off with the person who had supplied the statistics quoted in Saturday's newspaper. It was her practice to forward all of her expense vouchers via interoffice mail. Occasionally, the bookkeeping department called her to clarify something, but the conversations were short and formal. She wouldn't have recognized her accuser had the woman come in and kissed her on the cheek. 2 empty desks with nameplates, 2 women standing without name tags. Based on no information whatsoever other than a deer-in-the-headlights look on the younger woman's face, Anna Maria chose the older woman as the likely one when she barged into the small office. "Are you Dolores Haggerty?" "Yes. May I help you?" "I think perhaps you can," Anna Maria dryly replied. She sized up the woman in front of her. Mid-40s, short brown hair, attractively swept away from her face, glasses, pearl earrings, and a feminine red-knit business dress. The bookkeeper looked every inch the professional woman, as did her opponent in a gray suit and white silk blouse. If fisticuffs had been the point of this encounter, it would have been a mismatch. Dolly was at least 6 inches taller, 40 pounds heavier, and a whole lot younger. The 2 women were about to trade blows, low ones for that matter, but neither would be laying a hand on one another. After all, they were politically astute professionals. They adjourned to a corner of the accounting office with purposefully composed faces. Dolly wore a pleasant smile. Her lipstick today was the shade of a red delicious apple. It was her habit to keep the Today's tube on her person at all times and reapply it often as needed without aid of a mirror. Without a smudge to her makeup, the opener went to the lady in the red dress. "Mrs. Croc, I did not lie to the reporter. I answered his questions truthfully. He quoted the Freedom of Information Act. What he wanted was information that is legally available to the public." The main event between the pillar of the community and the pain-in-the-ass council member was also conducted in pseudo-privacy. The ambush came in a quiet place in the marbled hallway. Anna Maria came out swinging, hoping for a knockout. "I can prove you're a crook," she hissed. "What's more, I'm going to make you the rallying point of my brother's campaign. He knows that you did the electrical work in his classroom. He knows you are responsible for the death of that child. My suggestion to you," she concluded by stabbing the air somewhere near the direction of the man's belly button, "is that you resign." From a distance, onlookers saw a tiny old woman stiff with anger, giving the man who towered over her a good-sized piece of her mind. The object of her vituperation radiated patience and tolerance for an inappropriate vitriolic display, maybe even a tinge of pity for a woman who was embarrassing herself in public. "Is that all you have to say?" Arthur asked with a smirk in his voice. "I'm finished," she replied, clapping her jaws tightly together to hold in a cough that was brought on by her fast breathing. Turning on his heel, Arthur quipped over his shoulder, "Indeed you are." End of round. The lady in gray had a face to match her suit and was using the wall to prop herself up. Back in his own office, Arthur shut the door for a few minutes of quiet thought. He'd have to check some things in the file room to be sure, but it looked like Councilwoman Crock had sadly misinformed herself on the scope of his activities. He gave Dolly a buzz and made plans to mix business with pleasure. Being two creative people, spontaneous ones, Dolly and Arthur could find a lot of different places to have sex in a big city at lunchtime. They made a point of not entering the designated spot together, nor exiting at the same time. But if there was a lock on the door of the tryst, they didn't secure it. It was a particular thrill if they thought they were inches away from someone who would be aghast at their conduct. Business in the file room was generally slow just before lunch. Carol Barkis had come to know it was acceptable policy for an employee to leave 15 minutes early for lunch, just as long as she posted a note to that effect and was back on duty by 1:45. Since she was a child, she had borne a pronounced astigmatism, and from the 4th grade on had had to wear glasses to correct it. No matter what style, whenever she bent forward, her glasses would ski downhill and occasionally slide right off her nose. Contact lenses, or one of those elastic bands like athletes wear, was the only answer. Practically everyone she knew warned her that hard contact lenses and astigmatism didn't mix, but Carol was willing to ignore them since she could now afford to give it a try. Today, over a lunchtime appointment, her optometrist gave her a pair of contact lenses to try, and he said they ought to work. She certainly hoped so. The lenses had been in her eyes for almost half an hour now, and she was planning on taking them out as soon as she hung up her coat in the back of the file room. They weren't exactly uncomfortable. Well, maybe a little, she admitted to herself. Not painful. Mostly they just made her feel irritable. When she came into her domain, Carol had been quite unprepared to find Councilman Huffnagel and Mrs. Haggerty from accounting tucked in among the files. People weren't allowed to just wander around in the file room and paw through the cabinets, no matter how much they thought of themselves. He was seated on a low stool, his hand resting on the handle of a slightly cracked bottom drawer. She was in the middle drawer, in the next cabinet, pulled wide open, and she was standing in the space between the two, bending over the drawer. "Be careful there," Mrs. Haggerty, Carol warned. "If you step back, you'll fall over that drawer at the bottom." Personal safety was one of the reasons why only file room employees were allowed back in the stacks. Carol knew she'd get in trouble if either of them got injured on her territory. It wouldn't matter that she was officially off the clock when the incident had happened. "We were looking for those records I asked you about on Friday," Huffnagel said. "They haven't been returned yet." With controlled effort, she squashed the snotty attitude that was rising on the surface like a bubble of swamp gas. "You could have left me a note, and I would have called you as soon as I got back from my lunch. I put a sign on the counter that I'd gone 15 minutes earlier today. Sorry if you missed it." The sorry sounded dangerously sarcastic coming from someone with absolutely no stature. Well, if they were waiting for me to move so they can get on with whatever the hell the two of them were doing, they have another thing coming. Carol soundlessly fumed. She held her ground at the end of the stack and rubbed under both eyes gingerly. The bookkeeper had to shut the drawer she was searching through to let the councilman pass her. Carol offered a pro forma apology once again for not having what he was looking for, to which he gave a curt nod and made his way out of the file room. Mrs. Haggerty engaged Miss Barkis in several minutes' conversation about the new contact lenses. "I recognized the hand and eye motions," Dolly said. "I tried contacts myself a couple of years ago. It didn't work out. I always felt like my eyeballs had too tight shoes on. Made me tense." "That's exactly how I feel," Carol exclaimed. "My teeth are gritting. I can't wait to take them out." Her hands kept creeping up to her eyes, and she held them into her sides of her dress to stop them. Her optometrist had specifically said, "No rubbing your eyes." I guess I'll try putting them in again later this evening. I hope I adjust to them." Carol's voice sounded like she doubted that they would. Dolly wished her good luck and went on her way empty-handed, more than 3 minutes after Arthur had left the file room empty-handed as well. After a bit of thought, and with her glasses perched back on her nose, Carol opened both file drawers to which they had been looking. No cockeyed file folders to indicate what the two of them had been searching for. The lenses had given her a headache, and her eyes still felt odd. "Who cares?" she decided, slamming the drawers. "I need some aspirin." She did make a mental note to contact Mrs. Crock about the files. They were only supposed to be kept overnight once, and it had been a week today. He had a right to be angry, but the two of them wouldn't have found those files in this section of the file room anyway. Anyway, the sign up front clearly stated to wait for assistance. "Like I'm going to complain to somebody about it," she said aloud. Her sarcasm was wasted on the empty room.